There's many different programmable features and options on the SB44-8. There's two different ways to program those options. The first is by using the buttons that are right here on the keypad, and by pressing them in a certain sequence, we're going to be able to program any options we'd like. The second is going to be to use your phone. So you can download the app on either Apple or Android and put it on your phone, select what other options you want, and then send it over. This works very similar to our DLIT MC and our DLXT HR and HU MC lights, which have previously come out. First, I'm going to go through how you do this using the buttons. This is a summary that comes with on the manual of all the different options. To get into those options, I'm going to hold down my power button. It's going to beep at me. The first button here that's lit, button number 2, is going to allow me to get into my phone programming mode. We're going to skip that for now. The second button here is going to change the intensity of my backlighting. Notice as I press it, it's getting a little bit brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter, and then it turns off. So the off there is the lowest intensity. It actually turns off your backlighting and only illuminates the button if you have an active button, something that's on. That would be good if you don't want a lot of excess and stray light in your cabin at night. So when I press my button to get into program mode, it's a little confusing because all the buttons are off. That's because I told it to not have any backlight. So I just press that backlighting button and it'll come back to life. Now, if I want to turn off the buzzer or the beep, all I have to do is press this button here while I'm in the programming mode. Now I'm going to let go of that, and you notice that I no longer have any feedback, audible feedback. If I turn that back on, I'm going to get back into programming mode. You just press that one more time. The last button here is your pattern select. That's only going to apply if you have your outputs flashing in a pattern. If they're just simple on-off buttons, that's not going to apply. To get into more advanced programming, we're going to keep holding down the power button at the same time that we hold down that button and that button. You notice that it immediately made a tone and that this LED is now flashing. That's telling you that you're in the advanced programming mode. So how this is all listed out is this kind of goes as a symbol of what page of the book you're on, we'll say. So this indicating 1, farthest right LED, is going to say we're on page 1. And that's going to allow me to program anything that's in this first row here. If I press and release my power button quickly, you notice that it incremented to row 2. In row 2, I want to show you an option. So you can see here it says power equals output. So if you don't want to have your unit power be able to turn your unit on and off, you can just have it hooked up to your ignition switch and it'll turn on and off that way. You can use that button as an 8th output. So I want to do that. I'm going to press this button to make it red. And then I'm going to exit my programming mode by holding down my power button, and it'll go back to normal. Okay, so now you notice, well, you notice two things. One, when I press this, it doesn't have any effect on any of the other buttons. 2, if I zoom you out here, you're going to see that when I press this button, it's now triggering this. I have it hooked up to these lights. You can have it hooked up to anything you'd like. So that's a low current output, high side switch only. So if you need to do additional lights and not trigger wires, you're going to need to use an external relay. But if you're just triggering some wires on your stick or on your light bar, that's going to be plenty for you. So I'm in my program mode now. So the first button here is going to remember the last state. So what that's going to do, I'll show you. This is kind of an interesting one. I'm going to turn that on. Turn on my system. Okay. So normally when I turned on my system, say it's hooked up to an ignition switch, it's going to turn on every single time. If I turn it off like that, it'll stay off until you turn your vehicle off and on. When you turn it back on again, it's going to light up again. If you don't like that, then by pressing that option called Remember Last State, it's going to stay off. If you trust this off, turn your vehicle off, turn it back on again, this is going to stay off. The only way to turn it back on again is to press the power. There's an active beep in here. So what that's going to do is going to beep every few seconds just to let you know that you have a light on. So you notice it's beeping continuously. So traffic director functions. Okay. So if I go into here, okay. So this button here is going to turn on my traffic director as a system setting. The next button over is going to turn on center out as a system setting. So that's going to make this button here be center out. And the last button is going to enable warn as a setting. So that's going to make this the warn feature. The biggest difference is it's going to make these all into radio buttons, or whatever options you've chosen here. I'll show you that in a second here. So I press left here. I don't have a traffic director hooked up, so it's nothing's going left, but my indicators are. Press right, I go right. Press center out, I get center out. And press warn, I get warn. So the big thing I just did is I made this have feedback, and I also made it so these are radio buttons. So if I press that and then press that, it turns off whatever other feature, because you can't have left and warn on the same traffic director at the same time. Okay. Momentary, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's just going to make the button so it only turns on while you hold it. Normally opens, also pretty self-explanatory. Instead of being on when it's red, it's going to put out 12 volts when it's not red or bright. We have default here. So if you go into my programming mode and press these two hidden buttons here that aren't lit, it's going to flash once, twice, 3 times. Then it did a big flash. That means that now I'm back to factory defaults. So everything should be back to normal. All right, so that push button 2 turns on other buttons. That's down here. You notice that is lit, off. So I'm going to get into my advanced programming mode here. And make it, press the button until I get lit, off, lit, off. Okay. Notice this one's not lit. That's because push button 2 is automatically going to turn on with push button 2. So I'm going to turn on this one and this one. Okay. Now the next feature is what turns off when you press push button 2. Okay. Well, how about I turn off this one and I push button 2 and I'll leave this one on. Okay. All right. So you notice that all 3 of these turned on when I did that. Press it off. It turns off just those 2. And then this one you can just turn off manually. You don't have to do that. You can have them all turn off. And then, yeah, you'll notice that these do, although this is linked to turn them all on, you independently turn on whatever you'd like. All right, another thing I'm going to show here is the ability to flash these outputs. So I'm going to go into program mode, hold on my program button. Okay, I'm in program mode. All right, so the first thing we got to set is we need to turn on our flashing output. So I'm going to turn on all of them as flashing outputs. So what I want to find is on, off, on for these traffic director LEDs. Okay, that's what I've got, on, off, on. So I'm going to make all these buttons, that one I'm not using, as flashing outputs. The other thing I can change is my phase. It's down here. So that's on, off, off, off. Okay. So you can see the default is phase 1, phase 2, phase 1, phase 2, phase 1, phase 2, phase 1. All right, that's fine. We'll leave it like that. Okay, so we're going to exit. And turn these on. You can see they're flashing in the setup we've got. It looks a little weird because the flash pattern is pretty fast. It's designed for LEDs, and these are halogens. So I can change that pattern. So all I gotta do is turn this on, and if I press this button here, it's gonna cycle through my patterns. All right, so that's a pretty good pattern for a halogen. I think it's nice and slow. So now I turn these on. Whatever ones are on are gonna flash in the predefined pattern. Of course, you don't have to have them all flashing. You can have some flashing and some not flashing. The other ones can be steady. All right, so I'm going to go through how to change the options using the phone app. The options are all the same as we discussed before. It's just a different way of doing it. All right, so I pulled up the app here. So you click on each button, somewhat self-explanatory, and the options that are related to that button come up on the bottom here. So the button 1 can be changed from being a power button to controlling PB1. Oops. Button 2, I'm going to change this to make it momentary, just for our test here. And then button 3 has different options. For 5, you can change to be traffic director, as well as other options. Goes right down the line there. There's other options here that don't apply to any specific button. You can program those as well, like the backlight intensity. So the next thing we have to do is put this into optical programming mode. I'm going to hold down my power button and then press my front button, well, button 3, depends on what you have labeled. This is the sensor right here, a little circle. You can make sure that the flash of your phone is close to that. You can see that the third button is flashing red. That means that it's receiving data properly. When it's done, you can see that those traffic director LEDs lit up, and then that means it's successfully received the data. Okay, so now when I press this button, it's no longer a power button, it's now just a output 1 button. This button here is now momentary. That's what we programmed it to be. And that's pretty much all there is. You can program all the different same options. A couple other things of note. You can email what settings you've created to a friend. You can copy the settings and do pretty much the same thing. I guess it would be to email to somebody or save it somewhere. You can save your settings. I already did a test. I'm going to do test 2 here. Okay. And click save, and it'll come up as being saved. I can then later on come through here and press open, and test 2 is here. I'll load it, and it loads any settings that I had saved previously onto here, so I can program something else exactly the same as I programmed this one.